Okay, I think we're live. I've got to tell you that was a little bit of a challenge. But we've worked it out by the look of it. So hi, Lisa.
Hello.
And in all of that, I forgot to put my season of the wise screen on. But I'm sure it's all good. So um thank you for your patience, Lisa. I don't know what happened and why that was going on like that, but we're all good now.
We're
So
here now. Yeah.
um, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. And yes, we are live. I was just about to say, while you introduce yourself, I want to check to see if we're live. What I might do is actually just put at everyone tag. Videos are frozen. Hopefully, it's all good now. We've got a few people watching. Let me know if the video is not frozen anymore. Okay. So, hi Lisa.
Hello.
We had, I actually want to use the way this just happened as part of our interview because both of us are in business. And one of the things about business is that sometimes there's a rocky start, there's bumps and holes and potholes and all of the things that happen when you're in business, and you can use them as um, excuses not to move forward, or you can just push through them as part of the process of moving towards your end result, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Lisa, can you just share a little bit with our audience um who you are and all about the purpose collaboration and human design? Give us a little bit of a rundown of what's going on in your world.
Sure. Gosh, where do I start? Um, well, let's start with a little bit about me. So I think I grew up feeling like I never really belonged on this planet. Like somehow there was some sort of mistake and they sent me to the wrong place. I'm sure many of us can relate to that. And I think
Absolutely.
that feeling really drove a deep curiosity within me from a very early age around why we're here. And I think I was drawn to the spiritual path very early. Even as a teenager, I was drawn to a spiritual path. And I remember getting my first job. I worked at KFC, and while I watched all my friends spending their wages on CDs and magazines and clothes and all the things, here I was buying crystals and spiritual healing books. I had this favorite little spiritual shop in the city that I used to get on the bus and go to all the time. And
Yeah.
um, so, I
Magical
think
child for sure.
that's right. That's right. And it helped, my mum was very spiritual as well. So I kind of grew up in that environment as well. But yeah, I think I really was drawn to that very early. And through those years in my 20s, I thought my work here on this planet was to fix myself. And I spent far too long doing that, trying to heal what was broken. And I became a bit of an expert in trying to fix myself, but never really did, as, as we know. And I think, that's a lot of what spirituality was back then, was about, healing all those parts of you that are broken. And I started my first business called Purposeful Pathways 20 years ago. And I was very passionate, even back then, before purpose was kind of the buzzword that it is these days, around helping women live a life on purpose. And so that seed was always in me, but I don't think I had, I had the passion, and I don't think I had the right tools back then. And I certainly didn't have maybe the self-worth to sustain that. And so I went back to corporate, and I stayed in corporate for a really long time, but that seed never left. And, I think, like for many of us, my wisdom really came in a season where everything really fell apart. And so if I look back at that season, here I was standing in a life that from the outside, it looked like I had everything. I had this great family and 3 beautiful children, and we had this brand new, newly renovated home, and I had the overseas holidays and the corporate career and all the things. From the outside it looked perfect, picture perfect, but I was so disconnected from myself and I was so miserable. And I remember having one of those, those shower moments when you're in the shower hiding the tears from the kids. I had one of
Yeah.
those. And I think as those tears were kind of rolling down my face in the shower, I felt this enormous guilt come over me around, you've got everything, and who are you to want more? And that kind of subsided into more of a determination, really, to be a role model for my kids around showing them that we just don't stay in places where we shrink. And that determination for my kids was really the driving force for me back then. And it started a slow, conscious dismantling of my life, where I made the choice to leave a toxic relationship and begin that journey into single motherhood. And when I began that journey, I had a 4-year-old son and 2-year-old twin girls. It was not an easy path, as you know, Elizabeth. You've
Mm.
taken that journey as well. Um, and so, I think it took me some time to kind of get into the rhythm of groove of just being a single mum. It took almost a year just to kind of come out of that fog, really, and start making more decisions about what I wanted in life. And I think I started to look at myself and do the inner work again, not the way I was doing it in my 20s, but take a different view of doing that inner work and really cleaning up the things that were holding me back and cleaning up things that were holding me, back from actually knowing who I am. And it was in that time that I stumbled across human design. And, that was a great tool for me at that time in my life to really find who I am, find my strengths, and find kind of a lens to why I'm here, and what do I do going forward. Um, and so, I was putting plans in place. I was doing things. I was studying late at night. It was crazy time. I had a full-time job and 3 little kids and a house to look after. And I decided to pursue 4 years of study at the time. It seemed crazy. And I made decisions financially around just having the financial stability to pursue the things that I wanted. And so gradually I started dismantling all the things that I'd spent so long in my life building up, and making conscious choices around, what do I want from me? And it was that time where I think that wisdom around, it's not so much about having it all as it is around being all of me. And so I chose to remember who I am and to align to myself in that time. And as when you start aligning to your true self, that's when the magic happens. And, I started getting the nudges from higher self, universe, whatever you want to call it, wherever those nudges come from. And, things started to flow in my life. And, as an example, more recently, I came across this nudge to study stone medicine. It was never part of the plan, and I love crystals, and of course it was attractive, and I had to think hard about whether that was a distraction or whether that was part of the path. But doing that course to become a certified stone medicine practitioner, I it gave me this ancient Taoist wisdom and tools for transformation that I never really saw coming. And I look back now and I think the work that I do now is so much richer because I followed that path and I followed that nudge than what maybe it would have been if I hadn't have done that. So yeah, I started to align to myself more and more and more, and still continue to do that even today. Um,
Mm. Mm.
and I think the final piece of that dismantling was the choice to leave my corporate career and pursue work that was really more aligned to who I am as a person, and that's where I created the Purpose Collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much in that, so much in that, and something that Debbie, I jotted it down, and I noticed that Debbie grabbed it as well. Don't stay in places that make you shrink, and
Yeah.
it's it's really interesting because we can be so defined by what we think our purpose is, because, like as you said, it looked like you had everything. Excuse me, it looked like you had everything, from a superficial point of view, looking in, You
Yeah.
know, you had all of the things that society puts you in the box and creates for you, and so you had the success, but it makes me think of a time I remember. I was walking on the beach, and I specifically remember seeing the two different paths that I could have taken. My dad died.
Yeah.
And I got, with the father of my kids. And that was a really tumultuous, like incredibly challenging, 10-year process and beyond. But I actually saw the line where if I hadn't have gone down there, I saw where I would have been, started off as a secretary to an accountant because that's the job I was in
Yeah.
when I met him, and then moved up to being very successful in, some sort of accounting firm, staying in Sydney, marrying someone wealthy, living the life and all of the things. And I could see that path, I would have been so utterly depressed
Yes.
because I would have known that somewhere there was something deep within that I was missing. And so even though the road on the other, that road less traveled is often full of rocks and stumbles and all of those things that most people on the outside would go, what on earth, like and see as particular, as failures even,
Yeah.
if they're causing you to shrink, if the other part, any part of your path is causing you to shrink, then is not part of your path.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think so many of us have those moments that,
Mm.
I think a lot of us ignore those moments
Yeah.
and take that traditional pathway.
Yeah, because it's easier, it's more comfortable, it's more socially acceptable.
Yeah, we're taught we should.
Yes, we
Yeah,
should. The whole people pleasing good girl stuff comes up, right?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I can feel that as a soul, when you if you do take that path where you shrink, as a soul, you get to the end of your life and go, God damn it, I bloody
Yeah,
did it again.
I know. I know. Then we come back and do it all again.
Yeah, yeah, man, I thought I'd nailed it this time. So, can you just, share with us a little bit about human design and give us a bit of a rough idea of what it is, for the layman, without
Yeah,
it being, too technical. Hopefully everyone that's on, because we've got about 7 people on at the moment. If I know that, Lisa, you put put a link in for people to check
yeah,
out their human design. Don't go and do it if you haven't done it yet. Do it later. But if you've got your human design, Lisa will be able to sort of help you. We're going to go through hers and mine.
yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit about human design for the people that, is the basic understanding of it.
Yeah, sure. So, human design is just one of the tools that I use because I think alignment really starts with knowing yourself, and human design is a fantastic, tangible, and practical tool to be able to do that. The way I describe it is it's really a synthesis of both some ancient wisdom with modern science. And so it's a synthesis of the ancient Chinese I Ching, the Kabbalah, astrology, the chakra system, as well as quantum science. So it kind of blends all of those things together to have its own system. So it's not any one of those parts. Um, but in its simplest form, I think it's really, I call it a treasure map to your greatest potential because it shows you how you are uniquely designed and how you're designed to make aligned decisions and how your intuition speaks to you and how you are designed to interact with others and where your purpose expresses itself and it will even show you what will show up if you're not showing up as your true self when you're out of alignment. It shows you those areas of vulnerability that we're all conditioned by. So I
Hmm.
think in its simplest form, it's really showing you all of those aspects. What are the right environments where your purpose will thrive and flourish? There's so many different aspects, and It goes beyond, just simple personality tools and things like MBTI and those types of things, because it's incredibly nuanced and it's unique to you. And I think in my 20 odd years in corporate HR and all of the personal development work that I've done, I've pretty much seen every tool out there that there is. I'm even accredited in many of them as well, through my HR work. And I think when you look at those 360-degree feedbacks or the values assessments and personality questionnaires, what they're doing is they're asking questions of your mind. And so you're answering questions based on your ego and your identity. And what human design does, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond the mind to actually reveal your true self. And that's what I love about it. And it was really a game changer for me because, I've used all of those tools in my coaching work over the last 25 years. But this one really, it changed the game because it was really just getting to the heart of the person. There was no hiding from it. There was no answering questions. Oh, I should be more like this and answering it that way. And so that's what I love about human design. And, just to give you a story about how I met human design, it was early 2020 and I was on my morning walk and I was listening to a podcast, and the host, I can't remember what she was talking about, but she mentioned human design before she kind of went on with whatever she was saying. And I literally stopped in my tracks and I took my earphones out and I heard this whisper from my higher self say to me, "This is what you're going to do." And like, I'd never heard of human design before. I thought maybe it was like something to do with HR, like human resources. Um,
Yeah.
but I went home and I Googled it and I found the official school and I signed up for 4 years of study within the hour. And I love that story about how I met human design because it's a perfect example of me living my design. And I didn't know it at the time. But if you know anything about human design, I'm a manifesting generator. And so I'm here to respond to things. And I certainly responded to hearing the words human design. And I also have this prominent channel in my chart, which is about powerful in the moment action. And so, hearing those words, responding to those words, and within an hour signing up for a 4-year accreditation was a perfect example of me just being fully in alignment with my true self.
Yeah,
And,
right. Yeah.
I think it goes to show you don't necessarily need to know your design to be able to live it. I think it's mostly about being in alignment with who you authentically are. But let's be honest, how many people out there on the planet do you know who are aligned to themselves or have done that inner work to really know who they really are? Most of us are walking around with this cloud of conditioning over the top of us, and all the noise that comes with that. And I think if I had another example to show you, I think like just taking you as a perfect example, I'm always listening with my human design ears and eyes these days. But I heard you recently say, one of your strengths is that you hear complex information, but then you go and you just give it a go and you apply it and you see what works for you and what doesn't. And that's a great example of you being in alignment with your design. You've got this third line profile, and that is your process around trial and error and experimenting with things to see what works. And so I think when we are in alignment, our design just flows through us. But most of us aren't. And, if we are like what I was back then, they're more fleeting moments of alignment than consistently showing up day to day in alignment with our true self. So I think really in a nutshell, that's kind of the benefits of what human design can do.
Well, it's interesting because we've got someone on here, Shannon, who's put that she's worked with human design for 3 years and she's a 5/1 manifesting generator. So
Yeah, me too.
she's yeah, I'll throw it in. Yeah, awesome. And it's interesting because the work that I do with alchemy, the whole thing is all about we're not broken, we don't need to be fixed, stepping into your greatness, into your genius. And yet 95% of the time we sit in our unconscious that feels like it's broken and needs, it's fragmented and all the things.
Yeah,
And we're looking for a formula. And so, human design has that formula aspect to it, doesn't it? Like
it can. Yes,
blueprint. Mm.
it can. But it's more than a formula, and it's not about knowledge is only as good as you apply it, right? It's
Yes.
actually about living your design, and it's not any one formula. Yes, there are, there's things that can guide you back to alignment around your strategy and authority. Absolutely. There's kind of a formula in that, but
Mm.
it's really about showing up authentically as yourself. It's not going to tell you how to live your life and, what job to take and all those types of things. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
no, you've got to participate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I first looked at my design, there were aspects that I absolutely resisted and refused to integrate. You want to say that? I think like at its simplest form, I remember one of the early classes that I did, and she was talking about generators and manifesting generators, and that we're not here to be manifestors. And I remember in that class thinking, what's she talking about? I'm a great manifester. And I was thinking about it in the law of attraction sense more so than what she was talking about in terms of how our energy works. And it took me a while to really understand that I'm not here to initiate. And I'd spent most of my life, particularly in corporate, hustling and trying to force things to happen and getting things going and initiating and burning out all the time. And it wasn't
Mm.
until I kind of relaxed into my design and that I am here to respond, and really relaxed into it. It was such a relief because I didn't have to do all the hustle. It's almost like that divine feminine coming in where you can just relax and receive and allow life and magnetize life to you to be able to respond to what lights you up and what doesn't. And, that was a bit of a journey for me to really understand and really kind of put that into practice day to day, let go of the hustle and the grind. Um, so that took some time, and also, Shannon was talking about being a fifth line profile like myself, and all profiles have their own challenges, right? But I really resisted the fifth line. I didn't want to be that. I kind of went into the chart. I wonder what my chart would look like if I did it an hour before. Like maybe I was born an hour before Mum said. Trying to find a way to kind of get out of being this fifth line, and there it was. It was everywhere. It was there. I'm definitely a fifth line, and the things I didn't like about the fifth line was really, it comes with this projection field. And so people are projecting expectation on you to, be the savior and all the things. And, it's not a conscious thing, it's just the resonance, it's the frequency. And, um, and yeah, being the savior and in human design language, it's called the general. And so you come in times of crisis to provide practical solutions, and then you kind of step away. And there's loneliness in that sometimes because people are projecting on you, and then when you don't deliver what they're expecting, you get kind of knocked off your pedestal a little bit, or you go into these times of peace where you don't need the general anymore and you kind of feel a bit forgotten about. And so when people come to you, it's like when they want something, so that can feel a little bit lonely. And coupled,
Mm.
I was talking about not feeling like I ever belonged, that kind of fed into that a little bit. But there's certainly great aspects to being a fifth line. It has this leadership aspect, and it has this ability to bring practical solutions and to see what other people can't see. And, for me, it was really a process around finding boundaries and not doing things just because people expected that of me, and being more discerning around entering into things because they're correct for me, not because of what others wanted. And also knowing I'm not here to save anybody. That's not my role here, even though that's what people are projecting onto me. I'm not the savior. It's for them to save themselves. So
Mm.
yeah, so it takes some time to integrate all those aspects. We all want to kind of see all the shiny new things in our design and what's the formula and all the things, but there are some things in there that take some time to really integrate and understand about ourselves and live day to day. Yeah.
Mm. Well, we've got an example of that from this morning, like um Lisa is part of my conscious creator circle, and this morning we were talking about all the flow that was happening for me, and Tim and his project, his catamaran project. And one of the things that I have become aware of is that I'm really good at helping people. And so, I've had a big shift of my own just recently and realized that this side of my business is only going to be about 30% of what I do. and that my energy is really needed in this manifestation creation of Tim's. And if I didn't know myself well enough, I you could go into, like you're giving your power away, you're going into service again, and you're being the good girl or whatever, but actually it's part of who I am. And then you type in, it's something in my, I said, I'm sure it's in my human design. You go, yep, here it is.
Yeah.
Like here is part of what my design is, something to do with the earth or something.
Yeah, we were talking about patience, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that
I'm
divine
very
timing
patient.
and
Yeah,
patience.
divine
Yeah.
timing. Yeah.
Yes.
Debbie's also just put, she's a manifesting generator 3-5 here.
Yeah. Yeah. I have
So
a lot of 3-5s in my life, actually.
yeah,
I
right.
love them. I've got a soft spot for the third line. Yeah.
So so for people that someone like me that's got no idea about human design, um, I hear about manifesting generators and projectors and generators and all of these things, and then the 3-5 and the 1-5 and all the, like it is
Yeah.
all a bit, um, I'm just wondering if now might be a good time to throw up my
Yeah.
chart in,
Yes.
and
Let's do
if we
it.
have a look at my chart, and you can sort of talk us through what people are looking for when they go in, because you did put a link in
Yeah.
that people can go and find out what their human design chart is.
Yes. And yeah, if anyone missed it, I'll drop it into the comments after this as well.
Here
But
as well, that would be
yeah,
great.
yeah. So you can go onto my website and get your free chart. Let me just share the screen. Hopefully I'm sharing the right one. I've got way too many tabs open. Some little insight to how my brain works. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. I'm
Perfect.
just watching to see if it comes up on the screen. Yep, it does. Yep, it's done.
Oh, that's great. Excellent. Well, this is your design. So I kind of put together a little bit around like what I would take somebody through in a full human design unpack. Obviously, we don't have time to do a full reading today, but if I just jump screens, I'm in Canva. I'm not used to using that. This is your body graph, and I think maybe a good place to start would be just a bit of an orientation, because I think it's quite overwhelming when you first come to human design and you see this image and there's all these shapes and lines and symbols and
You've got
numbers,
no idea.
decimal points, and like, what on earth is this? So it can be very confusing. But basically, what this image is showing you. So if we start with the image in the middle of the body itself,
Mm-hmm.
all of the shapes that you see in there, whether they're coloured in or they're white, these are called centres, and they're like, I always liken them to like a radio station. So each of them are like tuning into a different frequency. So one might be jazz, one might be pop music, those types of things. But the centres are really parts of ourselves. So one's about emotions, one's about communication, one's about inspiration that comes in, how we conceptualize things, our energy. So that each of the 9 centers have their own kind of frequency of how we take in and process information and the world around us. And then the lines that are connecting all of those centers, these are called channels. And in essence, we're a channel, we're a line. So you can see this black line here between these two brown shapes. Where a channel is fully colored in, this is really what our superpowers are. These are our
Okay.
strengths that we bring, and it forms part of how we express ourselves through the world. And so, yeah, so we've got these shapes called centers and we've got these lines called channels. And anywhere in our chart that's coloured in, don't worry too much about what the colours mean. They don't really mean much at all. But where they're coloured in, it's what we call our definition. And so our definition is really what's defining us, how we show up consistently in the world, who we are. Whereas the white areas, the places that aren't coloured in, they call it in human design language the school of life. It's where we are open to both conditioning but also the potential for wisdom. It's those areas of life where we're not consistent in those areas, and we go to school to learn kind of more about that and gain the wisdom in those areas. So, we say that the coloured in bits are the student and the white bits are the school of life.
Okay.
And so the numbers that you see in these columns, anything that's black, so these channels that are black and these numbers that are black, these are imprinting from the planets at the time we were born. And that's why when we ask for your, when you're plugging in to get your human design chart, we ask for the exact time that you're born. Because what it's doing is taking imprinting from where all the planets were, and looking at the moment that you were born, which forms our conscious or personality side. And then the red bits are showing about 3 months prior to when we're born, the imprinting from the planets then. So each of these little
Okay.
symbols down the side, these gold symbols, these are all symbols for the planets. So it's just showing you where the planets were at the time of your birth and in which gate they were sitting in. So all of these numbers are called gates, and they all carry their own frequency. And so what these numbers are the corresponding gates in the human design chart. And so, I think if you were first learning about human design and you were looking at your gates, you'd look at these top two on both sides. And this is what forms what we call your incarnation cross. I'll talk about that in a bit, but that's kind of a big clue around what your purpose is. And so looking at, what's the energy of gate 64 and gate 63, both of which for you, they sit in the head center here. So that's it's just a bit of an orientation. Your mind's going to want to grab onto all of that and go, well, what does that actually mean? I think just let that all wash over you. It's just orientation to some of the language of human design, really.
Okay.
And then when you get your graph, you'll get information like I've put here on the slide here. So it'll tell you what your type is. So there's 4 types in human design. We have our generators, including manifesting generators. They're not a separate type. They are generators. We have manifestors, we have projectors, and we have reflectors as well. So there's 4 types in human design, and they really tell us, what's the container of our design and the way our energy is designed to work. So I'll talk about what being a generator means in a moment. And our authority shows us our decision-making strategy. And so for you, it's coming from your sacral center here, which makes you a generator. And again, I'll talk about what that means, but it's really about responding. If you think back to what I was saying about that response to life rather than trying to initiate and hustle and grind, generators are here to respond. And, you'll find that there's a lot of generators around, about 70% of the population are generators. So there's a lot of us around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our profile, this is what I was talking about earlier. You're a 3-5, I'm a 5-1. There's 12 different profiles in human design, and they really, your profile shows you how you show up in the world and how others see you. We call it the costume that you wear in life. So if you think about life being a play, let's say it's Romeo and Juliet, your type being a generator is the character that you're playing almost, and your profile is the costume that you wear. So are you playing Romeo, wearing a really traditional costume, or are you wearing some sort of modern or abstract Romeo costume? That's what our profile shows us. And then our incarnation cross is kind of like the plot. What's the story of the play?
Yeah.
Next to our purpose. Yeah.
So I'm a 3-5 like Deb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you'll see. So when you run a chart, whether it's on my website or somewhere else, that's what you'll see. You'll see your body graph, and you'll see that basic information about your type and your authority and your profile and those types of things.
Okay. So yeah, tell me, what does it all mean?
So, there's lots of words on here. I put this here just so you can kind of grab them and take them later. But, I think being a generator is really about that response. And so, what that means is that it's those gut responses to life, whether that's someone, if I use a really silly, simple example, I'll say to you, do you want to have Italian, or do you want a salad for dinner? Pasta or salad, and it's what lights up inside of you. It's like, oh, yeah, pasta. And you'll
Mm.
know it's not a gut response if you're putting a should or a because in front of it. So if you're saying to me, I'll have a salad because I need to lose weight, when
Mm.
really you want the pasta, that's when you know your mind's taken over and it's not a true gut response. And so, for us generators, really learning what our response mechanism is and knowing it intimately is important because we are conditioned away from it.
Mm.
Even
Mm.
like, all three of my kids are all generators. And, I love watching them when they were kind of little and they used to make these little generator noises. And my son does it now, he's 11, and he still does it when he eats. He has these like little yummy noises. It's very cute. But that's his
Yeah.
generator going, I'm really like lighting up and responding to this. And
Ah, is that why I do that?
yeah, yes. And the worst thing we can do as parents, if we've got generator children, is say, and I'm guilty of it, I did it all the time, use your words.
Yeah, right.
Use your words. It's the worst thing you can say to a generator. And
Yeah,
like
right.
for me, I'm a manifesting generator and I have this really fast response. I've got this channel, this 3420 channel in my design, and it's very fast. And so, I always use the example, if you say to me, do you want to go for a walk on the beach? I don't say yes. Like I'm at the front door with my hat and sunnies and I'm looking behind going, well, come on. Like it's so fast and in the moment, it's just a full-bodied yes for me. That's how my sacral speaks to me. So, learning to hear your sacral response is important because it's slightly different for all of us. We're all generators, and yes, we all do have a response, but it could be a uh-huh or a uh-uh. It could be a movement, or it could just be a feeling that you get. Um, so really learning that. And it's not even just about questions. It could be seeing something as simple as seeing a sunset out the window and racing outside with your camera to take a photo. That's a response.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do that too.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. And so when like for the signposts for generators, and each type has their own signposts, when you are in alignment with yourself, you have this feeling of satisfaction. So for me, the best feeling in the world is like falling into bed at night, really satisfied that I've used my energy productively.
Mm.
That I've used my energy really well today. It's the best feeling in the world, this satisfaction that, I've used up all my vitality in all the right places that lit me up today. Um, and when we're not in alignment is when we're meeting resistance, probably because we're all trying to initiate that hustle and the grind I talked about, is when you're meeting with frustration. So if you're trying to like force things to happen and you're meeting with frustration, you're feeling frustration and you're getting resistance, you're not in alignment. And maybe just check back in. Are you actually trying to initiate, or are you responding?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful, isn't it? Because even those two movements, initiation and response, um, you know, responders means you've got to have stimuli first.
Yes. Yeah. But we're magnetic beings. It's the way our aura works. We draw life to us to respond to. That's how it
Yeah.
works. And,
Yeah.
I think people do often get confused around this whole concept of response and initiation and this whole waiting to respond. You'll often think that it's about twiddling your thumbs and waiting around for, something big to happen. But in the waiting, there's always active waiting. And in response, there's also driving things forward. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be your idea that, someone could just mention something to you and you go, oh, what a great idea. And then you drive it forward.
Mm.
You know, that's still part of the generator response.
And just out of curiosity, I'm thinking about responding to your intuition as well, right? So the response can be the stimuli can be your higher self nudge, like you got the radio, the podcast, you heard
Yeah,
the words, and next thing there's a voice in your head saying
yeah,
this is what you're going to do, right? So that's
yeah,
you responding to the stimuli that your higher self is giving you, because that was a white rabbit moment of listening to that podcast in
absolutely.
the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our intuition comes from this center here, the splenic center. This is these intuitive hits that we get, and they come as a whisper.
Mm.
That's how it comes. And whether it's defined or not, we all have intuition. For me, mine's undefined, and so it's not as consistent as maybe it is for you with definition in that center. Yeah, but absolutely, and the two work together. Like for
And
me, I don't have definition here. My definition is over here in my solar plexus, which is all about having emotional clarity. I'm not designed to make spontaneous decisions, whereas you are.
mm,
So yes, sometimes I can, and it has to be in response. But I have to have the emotional clarity around the decision itself. And for me, that it's almost like a sleeping on it, and it's like a not a nervousness in an anxiety sense. It's a vacillation around the decision until I kind of wake up one day and go, okay, I've made the decision, and I feel solid in it.
yeah.
That for me is that emotional clarity.
And can I just ask why there's some lines that are completely defined and then there's others that are colored but only halfway?
Yes, they come from these gates here. So what's actually happening? So if you take, let's see, what have you got? You've got gate 48 and gate 16 in your conscious side. We know that because it's black.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got, where's gate 48? You've got Uranus activated in gate 48, and you've got um, Saturn activated in gate 16. And so what's happening is when you have a gate activated, it will activate halfway up the channel. And so if you've got the corresponding gate on the other side, the whole channel will activate. So here you've got gate 34. You've got Neptune in gate 34 here on both sides. So that's why it's got these diagonal lines. It's both red and black because it's sitting on both sides.
Ah, okay.
So having Neptune activated, but you don't have the other channel on the other side. So you don't have gate 57 or you don't have gate 10 or gate 20 there. Sorry, that was probably a confusing one because there's three options. Or if we look at gate 21 here on your personality side, which is your moon, you don't have the gate 45 activated on the other side. So it's what we call a
So
hanging gate.
so what does that mean? It means I'm still in the process of learning it.
No, what it means is that, so see, you've got this open center. Actually, sorry, let me backtrack that. Where you've got the full channel, that's what's defining the centers. That's what's defining and coloring in these shapes. So
Mm-hmm.
where a whole channel is defined, it will define the centers on either side. So that's where your definition comes from. For example, here with your gate 21, what it means is that you don't have a consistent, reliable way of processing the information that comes through our ego or heart center, which is all about our willpower. And, you know, it could be that, you know, you have moments where you're trying to prove yourself, for example. That's kind of some of the conditioning that comes with that. And so that trying to prove yourself might actually come in the form of what gate 21 is bringing. So there might be a flavor to that conditioning. There might be a flavor to kind of what you're learning and growing through in that regard because you've got this hanging gate sitting there. So it's very
Mm.
nuanced. It's very detailed. It's, you know, it goes
Yes, it
well
is.
beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Which is why, you know, when I do a human design unpack, you know, I take a good 2 hours to kind of go through somebody's chart because there's so much in it and so much to absorb. And it's not, you know, you can't just go to a reading and have it and think, oh, you know, now I understand it all. It takes time to kind of integrate it and understand how it's all working together in your chart.
Mm. Yeah, you know what I'm getting is it's really like the blueprint of, I mean, that's what they call it, human design, right? Of what your soul came to experience and
Absolutely.
all the little nuances that are going to cause any challenges to correct along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
in that, like I definitely resonate with that, you know, having to prove myself, you know, that was something from my childhood. And so I'd love for you to share or, you know, just have a conversation around um, what happens when you start correcting those things. Like, like that's what we're here for, right? So your chart wouldn't
Yeah.
change because it's set in stone from your birth date and time. but you know, like it, so does it, what's the question I'm asking? Is there room in the reading to see when someone has developed that, you know, like, or yeah?
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit
absolutely.
about that.
I mean, like life, there's polarity in everything. There's a shadow
Mm,
side to everything, and there's, a light side to everything. And that's the same with all of the different elements in human design. And
mm,
so, as an example, this, I know it intimately for myself, but this gate 34 is an example, it's very prominent in my design. And, there's an element in the shadow side around forcefulness of
yeah,
that. But actually the wisdom that comes from that gate is about, being empowered and,
yeah.
all of the things that you talk around the 3 powers, right? It's
Mm,
that. So there's this evolution from kind of force through to empowerment in that. And so every element in the chart has that transformational formula in it. So if I jump to kind of your, let me just jump through a few slides. Um, I didn't intend to do all of this. I was just pulling it together last night. But if I jump to your kind of your 4 core gates, which is your sun and earth gates on the personality side and the design side, right? This is what makes up your incarnation cross. But here you've got this gate 64 and gate 63, which kind of sit in the head center. And it's really about moving away from that shadow of, if you look at the 64th gate of confusion, it's about kind of moving from confusion that's kind of clouding the mind and trapping that consciousness in all that kind of doubt and the noise, and looking like moving through to kind of awakening the imagination and having some clarity, and that, the power to create, which is all about what you do, by the way, creating new realities from that place of stillness into, what they call in the gene keys the city state, which is about illumination. And that's about your mind actually transcending thought itself and, unveiling the cosmic patterns. And, you look at the work that you're doing now, that's exactly what you're doing. You're right on purpose.
yeah,
You're right
right.
on
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
So yeah, so we move through this evolution and we can vacillate between two, it's not just a linear process. We can vacillate between all 3 of those aspects. But yeah, so when you're looking at whether it's the openness or you're looking at your definition, there's this polarity to it, and we're looking at, well, what's the evolution and what's the potential for wisdom. And so that's why when I talk about human design, I say it's your, treasure map to your greatest potential. That's what I'm talking about. This evolution into not only just aligning with who you are, but also kind of moving through into the gifts of your design and not sitting in that shadow state.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? And you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, how it relates to the sort of teaching, as you said, the work that I'm doing. But one of the things that I've said for a long time is that we are here, sorry, that when you acknowledge something, when you recognize a pattern that you've got, you know, 70% of the process is the acknowledgement of it. Like, you know,
Yeah,
as you were just saying, you know, confusion, I can definitely relate to that when, you know, I'm learning something new and intense, and how I go into overwhelm or confusion if it's bombarding me too much, you know, there's too much to learn or
yeah,
whatever it is. And knowing that that's part of my design, it sort of takes away, you know, that's part of self-mastery, right? You go, this is me dipping down into that identity again. And so now I recognize that I can let go of that or release it and not, you know, hold on to it, you
yeah.
know, let myself be bound by it, you know, anchor into it or whatever, is just acknowledging, oh, this is where I'm at. And it dissipates with the acknowledgement of it, you know?
Absolutely. And acknowledging that it's part of your process to move through confusion.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
about confusion being a failure or doubt.
Yes.
If you look at the 63, it's, this confusion and doubt is part of the process. And,
Yeah.
part of your purpose is really around doing it for yourself and helping others to move through confusion and doubt into kind of that truth state. You know, when you look at your purpose, it's on the cross of consciousness, and it's really about illuminating truth. And
Mm.
that's all what you're about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. So we'll jump out of that, and I want to ask you a couple of questions about um the sort of work that you do.
Yeah.
Um I lost you then. Went to the wrong went to the wrong, but you're here,
I'm
I'm
here.
back. Um So tell us a little bit about how you work with people, because, as you were saying, it's not just human design, it's also it is mainly about purpose, right? And people
Yeah.
supporting them into really recognizing what their purpose is. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit how you go about that.
Yeah, I think if I think about my work on purpose, maybe if I start with my philosophy on purpose, might be a good place to start. And I think that's born in a couple of things, both spiritual truths, but also I guess the wisdom I gained that I talked about earlier around that season where kind of everything fell apart. And so firstly, for me, I believe that, purpose is multi-layered and it's ever expanding, and it's not this finite destination that we magically arrive at in our life. I think there are many layers to it, and at its core, it's really about knowing who you are, who your true self is, and showing up authentically as that person. And then there's layers around our soul's evolution and growth, and obviously human design. We just talked around how that shows how you can move through some of those things, but also how we're here to serve the greater collective. And I think our own unique fractal expression of the oneness in all of that, and many, many other layers all in between that as well. And secondly, I think, just anchoring back into that wisdom that I gained for myself and have seen other people go through around this moving from having it all to being all of me. And so that's very
Mm,
much, my work around purpose. And when I say it's not about having it all, it's not about letting go of the dream and all the things we want. We're all powerful creators, as you know. That's what you teach. Um, we can have all the things. We can have the success and the wealth and the love and the empire, whatever that looks like for you. But if you're building all of that based on who you think you should be, it's never going to be fulfilling. And I think creating those things based or being more grounded in your truth and who you are is going to be a far greater feat than actually just trying to do things just because we think we should. And that's what it looks like from the outside. Um, and purpose is not really about finding something outside of yourself. It's a remembering, it's a coming home, and it's about realigning to your truth and reclaiming your purpose. And I think that's the work that I do. So I have a program called the Purpose Blueprint, and, I guide women through this transformational arc around those three phases of remembering who you are, realigning to your truth, and reclaiming your purpose.
mm,
And moving through those three things. And so for me, I don't purport to have all the answers around purpose by any means at all, but I do have that lived wisdom, and I've observed so many people throughout my life, who have dimmed themselves and, just to fit in or stay where they've, shrunk kind of thing. And, I have walked between worlds. I've had one foot in the door of a life that was calling to me, and one foot, in a life that I no longer wanted to be in many different aspects. And, I know what it's like to kind of deconstruct a life that you've built and rebuild it based on being all of you, and the power that comes from trying to, stopping trying to fix yourself all the time and starting to trust yourself. So, I, the work that I do is really helping people to bridge those two things. And, I think to give you an example of that, when I made the decision to leave my corporate career, I positioned myself very nicely into a role where I was going to be redundant. And as you know, there was a delay. We were selling the business, but there was a delay in the transaction, and that was over a year that delay happened. And so, I had to kind of straddle both worlds where this purpose was calling me, and this business was calling to me, but I was kind of in this holding pattern. And not only was I sitting in that uncomfortable tension for myself, I was carrying 200 odd people in the business through that as well. You know, and
Mm.
talk about all your human design coming into play, all the projections on me about having to have all the answers, and you know, you're meant to be the leader and you're meant to have it all, and what are you doing about this and what are you doing about that, and you know, all the things, and come and save me, and all of that was
Yeah.
all happening, right? So yeah, a lot of the work that I do has really come from that, you know, learnt experience around how do you straddle both and how do you bridge both worlds when you're trying to kind of deconstruct something and rebuild and step into your purpose. Um, you know, so yeah, purpose for me is about a remembering and a coming home to yourself. It's not something that you chase outside. And you know, it's not always a neat process, and it's definitely not a linear process. And it's not always easy, but it's deeply
Mm.
fulfilling. And so that's, you know, that's the work that lights me up, and what I love to do. I, you know, talk about satisfaction of seeing people step into themselves and step into their purpose is just the best feeling in the world. And I think
It is, isn't
there's
it? Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so many people out there that are just not there, or they, you know, they feel that inner ache that, why, you know, I've
Mm.
got it all, but why do I feel so miserable? What's
Mm.
missing? Yeah.
Yeah, and as it like there's a few beautiful sentences that you've said, like don't stay where you're shrinking. I love that, and also having it all to having me. I love that analogy as well. So many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
And so you're going to throw in the link into the chat once we jump off. That would be awesome. So anyone that's interested in human design and finding out more can go in and check that out and get their chart done. And if someone wants to further that, how can they get in contact with you? Just through that link as well?
Yeah, so I have a couple of options if people are interested in their human design, so they can certainly get a chart reading. I also have a session or two sessions called Your Soul Print Strategy, and so that's a full human design unpack, as well as a one-on-one coaching session, really about integration. And so for all your beautiful listeners, if they're interested in that, I'm happy to share. You know, between June and July, I'm offering a 20% discount. So you just need to put the code WISE in. So I'll drop that link in. But yeah, you can just go to my website and see all of my offerings. If you're interested in the Purpose Blueprint, which is a longer program, by all means, reach out. You know, there's a link on my website for that as well.
Excellent. Well, it's been like, started off rocky, but that's just the way it is.
It is part of my
With
design, by the way, rocky starts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the technical gods or whatever, but they finally came to play. And I just want to, give some gratitude and a shout out to my beautiful assistant Irene, who jumped on the call and saved the day for us.
Absolutely. I need an Irene in my life.
Yeah, she's so good. She's so beautiful. I'd love to see what her human design is, because we did the our May and Sun
Oh,
sign.
yeah.
We're totally complementary of each other. So I'm
Yeah,
sure that the same would be with human design. So
absolutely.
thank you so much, Lisa. It's
Thank
been
you.
an
It's my
absolute
pleasure.
pleasure. Yeah, it's been awesome, and really enjoyed, getting to know you on this level as well, like as a client, you sometimes miss out on hearing all of your wisdom, right? So it was absolutely beautiful to listen to all the your destiny, your mission, and your purpose. So it's so beautiful to be connected. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I just thought, if anyone watches and would like to ask any questions, just throw them in the chat and just uh, tag Lisa so she knows to come back. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure that she'd be happy to answer anything. So,
Yes, I can talk about human design all day.
yeah. And we didn't even get to the rocks, right? Like that's
No.
another level altogether. Take care, and we'll catch everyone soon. Thank you.